Hello and welcome to the aForm show. My name is Alan George.
And my name is Tisha Rao.
Each week, we sit across from thought leaders and change makers in the architecture and design space of the GCC.
We dive deep into their professional and personal experiences to find out what makes them really tick.
Our goal is to add value to your day and make you all much better architects and designers overall.
Finally, the views and opinions of the guests do not necessarily represent the aForm show.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Today, we are doing something a little different. We are normally held up in an office somewhere, on a studio somewhere, but today we're out sort of live at an event. Haven't done one of these in a while. I'm pretty sure a lot of you can relate to it. But what we have to talk about today is something which is a bit unique. The minute we heard about it, we thought that a lot of you guys would definitely benefit from hearing about this particular product. So we have the source themselves kind of tell us about what this is, how it works, and for designers primarily, what exactly is the benefit for us to be using it for our designs. So I'm going to briefly turn over the podium, if you may, over to Antony from SHURE. Antony, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Nice to meet you. How's things?
Good, not too bad. Just before we started recording, you kind of walked me through the SHURE stand. And for those of you who haven't seen it yet, probably really interesting stuff. I highly recommend if you can make it down to Index that you absolutely should. And if you haven't, we'll have some contact information later on in the show for you to get through. Antony, if you can briefly sort of introduce yourself and tell us what is SHURE doing at Index?
That's a good question. Sometimes I wonder that myself. My name is Antony Lovell. I'm the Global Business Development Manager for SHURE. SHURE is an American corporation. We've been going for a mere 96 years, so we've been around a bit. A lot of people know us from sort of the pro side of things, on the stage, microphones in front of politicians on podiums, a pope using them, whatever else. But we also have another division which deals with MCA, or musician and consumer audio, so aimed at the home user, if you like, retail. And we have the integrated systems division, which is what we're showcasing here today. So that's what is going into meeting rooms, into parliaments, into, auditoriums and so on and so forth. We are an audio company at heart. It's what really keeps us awake at night and gives us the drive. And we believe every voice matters. So no matter where you are, whether it's on the stage, in the boardroom, or at home doing your own podcast, you should be able to have access to equipment that allows your voice to be heard and get your message out to the people. So we're here at Index because A, it's a live event, and live events are a big part of what we do. It's very exciting to be here. A bit scary, the first time in a year and a bit, but it's great to be here. The first day was yesterday. And we're here to chat to designers, interior designers who are looking at getting the audio side of things into those meeting rooms and making them as useful as possible for their customers. And ideally, without stealing the show. The technology shouldn't be the thing that everyone walks in the room and goes, oh, look at that big thing on the desk. It should be doing its job quietly in the background and let the room speak for itself.
Right. So if I can then maybe be the voice of the designer in this conversation, I'm pretty sure everyone can relate to not being able to hear yourself correctly on a Zoom call, having tripped over many wires and mics that are set up in these 20, 30 boardroom meetings, not being able to hear across rooms, having to kind of talk really softly or talk really loudly, depending on who is where. These are some of the problems which I think SHURE has tried to resolve in these lineup of products. So maybe if you can walk us through the most popular one that's been so far?
Of course. I mean, look, where we are right now in the world, what are we all talking about? It's generally the Zoom call, the Teams call, the WebEx, whatever else it is. And so that's a large part. We'll come back to that in a second. But those things have basically attenuated or exasperated the issues we had if everyone was in the room by themselves. We spoke just now briefly about the fact that if it's a large room, you don't want someone to have to be shouting at the front so the people at the back can hear. So we need that distributed sound throughout the whole room so it becomes as natural an environment as possible.
Right.
Say natural environment, we've got people trying to steal things around your neck while we're talking.
Right.
But there you go. This is the joy of doing things on the show floor before it starts. We've got people hoovering and so on. So it's that background noise. This is true. I mean, it's a very good example of the things we have to take account of.
Right.
If you're in a meeting room in an office, unless you've got really well insulated rooms, you're going to have people walking up and down the corridor outside, potentially having conversations. If there's loud people next door, if they're coming through the thin dividing walls, these things we have to take account of. So again, we're trying to make sure that the sound is as clear as possible, remove all that background mess, if you like, so the true message comes through. And then when we introduce the remote side of things, these hybrid meetings, these remote calls, it's even worse because while you can get your noise sorted in the room itself and your sound, obviously then it's got to go through your codec of choice, whatever that may be.
Right.
And then you've got that, that noise has got to go potentially far side of the world and back again. It's cleanly as possible. So then even, it's not just the microphones that we deal with primarily. We also have speakers as well. But, the far end, the amplification of what that message, excuse the phrase, you put garbage in, you get garbage out. And that is the clean version of that message.
Right.
If you pick up a bad sound and it has to go all that way through all that cabling,
it's just going to get worse.
At the far end, it's going to get worse and worse and worse.
Right.
Exactly. So it's got to be the microphone to us, and I am biased. It has to be the first point and the most important point in this whole chain of events.
Right. Okay. So in order to solve this problem, the first product that I saw here was, if I can, to be as blunt as I can, it's pretty much a ceiling tile. For everyone that's kind of designed false ceilings, you know what a 60 by 60 and 90 by 90 ceiling tile looks like. It's exactly that. If it were to be in a lineup, you probably wouldn't be able to pick it out. Very similar form factor, very similar kind of grill opening. And that essentially, Anthony, is a microphone. Am I understanding it correctly?
Correct. So you're referring to our Microflex 910. So Microflex Advanced 910. So we have a range of mics, Microflex Advanced. We deal in, everything's designated by numbers, apologies. So there are three main elements in that line. The 910, which is the ceiling tile, as you call it, our ceiling array microphone. There's a 710, which is a wall-mounted or a table-mounted unit, sort of more linear. And then we have the 310, which is more of that puck that we looked at on the table there.
Right.
Which sits again on a table. And all of these things allow us to steer the microphones. They all have multiple microphones within the single unit. And then it's a case of the algorithms within it are programmed so that when you sit within the coverage area of these things, with the 910 on the ceiling, we can do about a 9 by 9 meter square at a 3 meter height. It can go up and down a bit, but obviously the lower you come, the tighter the area. The higher you go, to a degree, it gets slightly larger, but then beyond a certain point, it doesn't become effective.
Right.
And that's one thing, case in point. In the good old days, microphones, we always encourage people, hold the mic up to your mouth. Don't have it sort of dangling away down by your side. We won't pick you up. When we launched the 910 in 2016, it was like what are you doing? You're putting the microphone up on the ceiling. It's miles away from my mouth.
Right.
But by having really focused lobes of pickup, which we can steer as required, that allows us to pick up just the noise right from you who's speaking and not from someone tapping on the keyboard next to you or someone dropping their pen the other side of the table or whatever else it may be.
Right.
So the idea is to get it up out the way, keep a nice clean room, let the table be what it should be. A table, put stuff on it. It shouldn't be cluttered with more technology than it needs to be.
Right.
It's up on the ceiling. As you said, the 60 by 60 for most of the world. In the States, it's ever so slightly different, at 2 foot by 2 foot.
Right.
Difference is minimal, but important. Don't put the wrong one in the wrong side ceiling, otherwise it will fall through.
Correct. So if I can maybe just visualize that, because as we know, most of us designers are visual sort of thinkers. So if this 60 by 60 tile is mounted in your false ceiling, your question would be, how did it pick up everyone's voice accurately and not have, pick up 2 people or 3 or whatever? Lobes, as you referred to, can probably be visualized as kind of like a cone. Think a ice cream cone, pointy side up and kind of the large radius pointing down to where the person's sitting. So essentially, if you were to put 1 or 2 of these in, say, a meeting room or a boardroom, each of these can cover a square footage of about 9 by 9, as I understand, correct?
It's meters, not foot.
Yeah, 9 by 9 meters.
Yeah.
And essentially this one speaker with its, I'm pretty sure, super awesome algorithm and program can actually direct these cones or these lobes to each individual seat. Now, yes, that sounds great. It sounds really bleeding edge as far as, sound pickup goes. The next question, which I'm probably thinking most designers have, is how complicated is it to actually shift this around? What if we now have a 5-person boardroom meeting rather than a 20? Can someone just go in and, change the configuration of this one speaker?
Yes, that's a very good point. It's not a speaker, it's a microphone.
Right, sorry.
It looks like a speaker because it's up in the ceiling, but I know that's a regular slip of the tongue, and I do exactly the same myself when I'm speaking to people. Even worse now that we do speakers as well. So to your point, yes, we can. We can have presets on the system. So the 910 is a very powerful tool. You could, in theory, use it straight out the box and it'll sound okay. But for it to really shine, to get the best value for money for our customers, you do need a specialist, a system integrator to come in, work through it, set up with you exactly what would be your potential meeting space requirements. How would you be using that room?
Right.
And then program accordingly. So yes, if we had a hollow square table set up with, let's say, 16 people around it, that microphone's got multiple units. Itself has multiple microphones within it, but we can only have 8 lobes at a time. And sometimes you might not want all 8, but let's assume we're using the 8. So in theory, we're now saying that in our particular hollow table, 16 people, 1 lobe will cover 2 people.
Right.
So as they sit as the seats are positioned around the room, we will program our lobe to pick up those 2 seats in each instance and set it up. It may be the instance you said that possibly they have presentations in that room, press conference or something, and those tables are flexible and on wheels and be moved around, and there could be a classroom style setup. So once we've preset our 8 lobes for the hollow square, we can then do separate setup and presets based around where these effectively 8 tables are now set, again with 2 people each. So now the 16 people are pointing forwards. It could be we have to make the lobes slightly wider because we need a slightly larger pickup pattern, and maybe the further away they are from the mic in the ceiling, go and cover a bit more surface area. But yes, that can be done. So then in theory, it's coming in the same way that you might have a setup on your room for the lighting or the AC, or maybe the blinds come down on a certain room setting. Right. The lobes on the microphone could do the same thing. They would know where to be pointing at the right time.
Right. So keeping with the sort of same product range or the same application, in addition to these ceiling mounted microphones, you also have ceiling mounted speakers.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. And you were explaining how they work in conjunction. Could you maybe sort of give us a real world scenario as to where you might have ceiling mounted microphones and speakers and why you would have them?
Of course, yeah. So we launched our ceiling speakers, which are Dante enabled. And I should have said all the Microflex Advanced, so the 910, 710, and 310 are all powered with Ethernet, PoE. They all come with Dante audio through them. Which is effectively just digital audio for the designers out there to worry about. And we can pick multiple channels in and out. The speakers are the same. So the idea is to create this ecosystem of products. So we keep it all within the same family. We have our own IntelliMix software, which will take the messages from the microphone, analyzes it, and sends it out in the cleanest possible way, allowing for echo cancellation, noise reduction, high pass, low pass filters, all this exciting stuff that we don't need to worry about because the computer does it for us. Right. And by the way, that can also just be mounted on a small nook that can sit in your credenza or behind a screen. It doesn't need a massive rack of equipment.
Yeah, I was just going to pause you right there, just to kind of get that point out very clearly to the designers. Many a time we've had to suffer for providing things like server rooms, having these massive racks, which only end up being 10% occupied for the most part of the entire office lifecycle. This entire speaker system, again, if I can just visualize it, basically can be controlled off something as big as an Apple TV or something a little wider than that, but it's in that kind of range, and it can be mounted in, like Anthony said, can be mounted behind a TV, can be mounted in a slick little shelf, no extra space needed, and I think that's the biggest USP of it.
Correct. I mean, we launched IntelliMix, which is the software package we're talking about here. Before, it used to be within the microphones themselves. And then we launched a separate software device so that people can take their multiple year or single year license for, and they can also decide how many channels they wish to have as well. And the idea was to put it onto items that are probably pretty much already in most of the meeting rooms or boardrooms around the world anyway. As we said, why have that big box that needs the fans in the rack and makes a load of noise, and it just takes up valuable real estate on the total floor space of the office.
Right.
So we wanted to get rid of all that and keep it as simple as possible by using category cable, cat cable, for the mics, for the speakers, into the nooks. It keeps it, as singular or as few types of cabling as possible. People don't have to have multiple connectors, all that guff to set it all up and make it complicated. So yeah, we try to keep it as simple as possible and do the job as well as possible. Getting around to you, and I apologize, I took a bit of a left turn of the light. So we were talking about speakers. So the idea of the speakers is we developed these speakers, which we launched last year, specifically for voice purposes. Yes, you can play your background music through them and they'll sound fine. But, I wouldn't be trying to replicate a rock concert through them. They're here and set up to be as effective as possible for voice calls, predominantly where we're going through those codecs of whatever it may be, Teams, Zoom, WebEx, and so on and so forth. And there are so many out there who proliferated over the last year and done very well for themselves and kept us all moving, thankfully, kept us all going. So what we could do with the speakers, if I touched upon briefly to you before we started recording, is a thing called voice lift. Now, it's audio amplification in the room, and it's only really suitable if we're talking about a decent sized room. Anything less than a person who is speaking, as opposed to speaking in the ceiling. So a presenter, anything less than sort of 7 meters away, it's a waste of money. But if you're going to longer distances than that, I shouldn't have to be raising my voice for you to hear me at the same level as someone who's sat next to me. Right. So, and the idea is to have that even distribution of audio across the whole room. So what we could do is we could zone the room. You could have multiple microphones with a 910 up in the ceiling, and then multiple pods of speakers, if you like. And as long as they're all got the right coverage with either the lobes for the mics and then the sound distribution for the speakers, we split the room into those zones. And if you think of it, I suppose the simplest way is the further away you are from the person who's presenting, the speakers above you will be working that little bit harder than those who are closer. Right. So, a long room, and let's say let's split it into 4 sections easily, and from A through to D. I'm at the front of the room, I'm in A, you're at the back of the room in D, and it's not a power setting thing, but the microphones that are working above me, they're picking me up. The speakers above you at D are running the hardest, loudest, or they're not running hard, but you know what I mean? They're giving you the most amplification. The ones in C, just in front of you, working that a little bit less. The ones in B, tiny bit, and the ones in A don't need to be working at all because people are within my natural audio range.
Right. So again, if I can just maybe visualize this. So this is kind of the solution to if you're otherwise in any kind of event, you have these, normally wherever the head of the event is, the stage or whatever, you normally have these massive speakers that are, blaring out into the audience. This is not that, right? This is basically going to even out that.
Exactly. I mean, if you like, it's conference quiet as opposed to concert loud. You don't want to be deafening the people at the front so that those at the back can hear. So it's distributed audio as opposed to just a big wall of noise coming down the room towards you.
Right. Okay. So that's definitely one of the most exciting products that I've seen so far, but I have for sure saved the best for last, because the minute I saw this product, I was like, that is so cool. That is so cool. I want all of them. But again, I'm going to leave it to Antony to kind of maybe describe it a bit, again, visually, if he can, and tell us how did you come up? I mean, how did this product come into existence? What was the problem that it was trying to solve?
So I think you're referring to our MXCW, which again is part of the Microflex family. So again, we had the Microflex Advance for the 910, 710, and 310. This is the Microflex Complete. So this is aimed at the discussion and conference market, if you like. Obviously, sort of government applications, many boardrooms around the world, they have a discussion system or a conference system, generally with a gooseneck microphone in front of each position, sometimes with a loudspeaker in front of each position. So you don't need that distributed audio we were talking about. It's a smaller unit in front of each person where they are. Sometimes you can do things like voting or agenda management or, speaker rights and who can talk for how long and so on in these systems. The MXCW with a Microflex Complete Wireless being the name. Wireless is the whole point. This is a wireless system. And this is to address the requirement for a flexible, stable and reliable platform that is quick to set up. We can use it in many different ways for different roles from a single form factor. It's very big in the rental market for that reason. People don't want to have 20, 30 different types of boxes, one for a chairman, one for a delegate, one for an interpreter, one for whatever else. One single unit. You program it as either from the GUI or on the unit itself, and you can say, you're the chairman today, and then we can run our meeting in a structured fashion. So think of it as a sound system in a box. You've got a microphone in front of each person so that their word is being picked up.
Right.
The loudspeaker in part of each unit is right in front of each person, so it puts the audio amplification for everyone else in the room right where you need it, right in front of them. There's a screen on there so we can see who is speaking, so people are aware of what else is going on in the room. We can vote from that screen if the chairman decides to, or the administrator chooses to start a vote. There's a couple of headphone jacks on either side, so maybe we do want to have that little bit of audio amplification for those who require it, or we could feed interpretation channels into that system, and then you could choose up to 8 interpreter languages. As long as you've got the interpreters doing that side of things for you, we can feed that audio in, because again, it's a Dante product into the APT, the transmitter, the transceiver, sorry. And then it may be that, we sit in the meeting, we could even be sharing one of those units, because we could use it for 2 people sharing a unit, probably not now with the whole scenario, but it could be that, you're listening in English on your headphones on one side of the unit, I'm listening in Italian on the other, and someone could be speaking in German. As long as we've got someone to do that interpretation for us.
Exactly.
And it keeps it then very good for those multinational meetings and so on. There's also NFC cards on there. So if you wanted to give people cards that they can be pre-programmed with their name, so I can sit anywhere in the room, it's free seating, I insert my card, and then when I press the button, everyone knows it's Antony speaking.
Right.
And at that point, the chairman might go, no, you're not talking. Let's go to Alan instead.
Right.
So the idea is it works on the Wi-Fi range. It's not a Wi-Fi product.
Okay.
It's very stable. We operate across channels called DFS, which is dynamic frequency selection. The point of that is they're channels that were previously reserved for things like civil defense and weather radar at airports, that sort of thing. Right. You can play in those frequencies as long as you play by the rules. So effectively, if we were having a meeting in the hall here using this system, an ambulance went past outside and was using that frequency, we have to jump off immediately and we can't go back for 30 minutes.
Right.
The system is clever enough that it's constantly scanning the environment around it. I mean, it's a constant thing, however long it's on. It will tell us exactly what channels are clean, where it's safe to jump to, where we've got to avoid because there's the competing traffic. And
Right.
it means you can have a really stable conference, and even a point that you could be singing or playing a constant tone down a microphone. Everyone else would hear it. We jump from channel to channel. We wouldn't even know.
Right.
It's so flexible. It's been really popular in the last year. Obviously, terrible consequences with COVID, but it's meant that people have had to take their meetings from their usual standard settings to more obscure places, to school halls, to a larger ballroom in a hotel venue or something, because they have to keep that physical distancing.
Right.
And this sort of product has allowed many government departments and corporations to keep working.
Right. I think, again, it's a shame that I can't kind of visually show this product to you guys. But again, I'm going to try and do my best to describe it. It's probably the size of a laptop, has a little screen on it, has a speaker, has a gooseneck microphone out of it. But what's nice, what I kind of like about it is it's analog enough to make its users comfortable, but it's also digital enough to kind of, like you said, automatically drop and, switch over to different lines and so on.
Yeah, and that's important. Sorry, it's you can have all the clever bits inside a box as possible. If it's just too complicated for the end user to get their head around,
right,
it's a waste of time, and it's just going to actually make your meetings less effective, which is obviously not the point. We're trying to make them more effective and efficient.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, look, I love my dad dearly, but wouldn't give him the remote controls of the telly. So same idea. Don't make stuff too complicated for the end user. Give them all the kicks they need, but don't overpower them.
Okay. All right. And Anthony, I guess finally the question would be a bit more on the technical side of things. Can you maybe tell us, or maybe there's someone you can refer us to, if any of us want to maybe get in touch, see these products, maybe find out a bit more about, their warranties, application, that kind of thing?
Yeah, of course. I mean, look, everything from Shure comes with a 2-year warranty, no problem. And, I suppose the point is, yes, please do get in touch. I mean, my email is Lovell_Antony, so LOVELL_ANTONY @Shure.com, SHURE.com. We have an office in JLT here in Dubai. There's 16 associates there. I'm in sales. There's a lot more technical people than me, but reach out to me and I can direct you in the right place. We'd love to come along, talk to designers, demonstrate product to them, do a POC, a proof of concept. And the important thing is there are so many solutions, and there have to be because there are so many different requirements.
Right.
So we'd want to have those conversations. What is it you're trying to achieve? How are you using the room? What's around you? We want to scan things like the wireless environment. I mean, the MXCW is a great product, but there are some environments, if you're right next to a massive, transmitter or something with lots of DVS channels, it wouldn't be the right thing to do. So we want to understand your requirements, offer you potential solutions, come and demo them, ideally on site.
Right.
Let you and your end user, your customer, be comfortable with them, and then we know the way forward. So yeah, we've got so much information on our website, shure.com. There are white papers, there's FAQs, there's a whole host of information, results from surveys we do around the world about how are people using those rooms pre-COVID and post-COVID. I mean, are the shape of rooms going to change? These are things that we're talking about.
Well, on that note, Anthony, thanks so much for taking the time out for
Absolute pleasure.
Educating us on this. As a designer who also now dabbles in a bit of audio, I must say, dabbles being the key word. I think this was a brilliant sort of insight for me personally. I can see a lot of your products getting used in a lot of non-office functions as well. Something like big majlises or something like auditoriums, amphitheaters, that kind of thing. Anywhere where you found yourself having to struggle to hear or having to talk a bit louder than you probably should, I think there is an application here. So once again, thank you so much for coming on.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming by, and reach out anytime and I'll talk to you for hours. Not a problem.
Awesome. And on that note, we will see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Fellow aFormers, thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for being part of our journey, and thank you for the immense support we've been receiving for our episodes. It has and continues to be a very bumpy road, but we wouldn't want it any other way. If you enjoyed this episode and it brought you value, please share this episode with anyone who may benefit from it. But of course, if you loved the episode, follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn, send us a little DM, and we may just send you a secret link to a secret episode which we've been working on. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. See you next time. Keep sketching.